Let's get into it. Interesting. Different items here. John Wayne's really popular here. Of course, he did many films here. A John Wayne Monopoly. Interesting.
And is it just one ticket for you?
Yeah.
Got hats, helmets, geodes, socks, all kinds of merchandise.
Shall we present our tickets?
Look at that.
Okay, I'll have a little hand scanner.
So cool. And they got all kinds of shirts for the little ones. And we got some leather. Check this out. Oh, that's nice. Leather skirts.
Yeah, we were well above 30 yesterday. So we're maybe right at maybe 28 or 8.
Nice. Pickled peanuts. I don't think so. Jalapeno.
It's okay. So you're gonna get one right here, and then once it's time, the guide will come in and then he'll look at your tickets for you.
Jalapeno jelly. That's actually really good.
Cactus jelly. Yeah.
So this is purely a Hollywood invention. It was a prop from a film that was shot here a couple of years ago called Stiff Drink and a Clean Shave. Released supposedly sometime this year. But they didn't want to spend the $18,000 to take it back to California, so they donated it to Old Tucson.
Nice show, man.
Racing each other to the finish line that year. The winner of that race was The Wizard of Oz. It came out in theaters in August of 1939. Right on the heels of that, the much anticipated adaptation of Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind arrived in theaters in January of 1940. Not to be outdone, a little studio by the name of Columbia Pictures, which was sort of known more for B movies at that time, they decided they were going to go head to head with the big boys and put out their own sweeping historical epic. And it was going to be about the state of Arizona, and it was called Arizona. Yeah, very original title. There was one small problem that hit them right at the beginning of production, though. They were told by reliable sources that the Old West was still around in Tucson in 1939. But when their scouts came out here, they discovered that there wasn't anything left. The reason that there wasn't much left of the Old West in Tucson by then is that prior to the arrival of the railroads in this part of the state in the 1880s, there wasn't a lot of lumber here in this part of the state. You can see our trees certainly don't, I mean, they're good for firewood, they keep shade on your house, but you're not going to be able to build much with these things. So all of the buildings in Tucson prior to the 1880s, most all of them were adobe structures like this one. Well, by 1939, since they're made out of dirt, they've melted. They had turned back into the dirt that they were made out of, or had crumbled or simply been replaced by wood and modern brick as it became available as the railroads brought more things into town. So they had to come up with another place to shoot their film. And you're looking at it. This is the 300 acres that they leased from Pima County in 1939. With a budget of $2.3 million. That was a lot of money in 1939. If you adjust for the dollar, that would be $51.7 million today. They came out here with a small army of craftsmen, historians, and laborers. They first had to make almost 400,000 adobe bricks. And those bricks were then used to construct the 82 buildings that were laid out according to a map that they had of what this town looked like in 1862 when the film takes place. The only thing that these buildings did not have, they were, as you can see, very detailed structures, but none of them had roofs. And the reason for that is that the cameras back then needed a lot of light to work with. There's no electricity out here in 1939, so they borrowed an old trick from the silent movie era, where they had big skylights in the ceiling, just let sunlight come in. That's why there are no roofs here. The biggest spotlight that they had access to was the sun itself, so that lit everything, interior and exterior shots in the movie. Even the scenes that took place at night, they just put special filters over the cameras to dim it down a little bit, and they're telling you it's nighttime, just so you'll know. Wow, it's dark tonight. They're walking around with the lanterns right there next to their face so you can see the flame, and it just says, hey, it's night. Even though if you look down, you'll see these long shadows on the ground. It must have been a full moon that night, apparently. Well, that was the only film that was shot here. After they filmed Arizona, Columbia Pictures packed up and went home. They just left all of this to sit. And nothing was done again until 1946. At that time, the next group to come into our story is the Junior Chamber of Commerce out of Tucson. And these kids were pretty industrious. They worked out an agreement with Pima County to lease the 300 acres, including the 82 structures here. Anybody care to guess as to how much they were charged a year for that? $1. $1 a year for the 300 acres on the property. You try to get that kind of a deal today in Pima County. Well, they then started doing what we do here during our Western experience. They had gunfights in the streets. They had can-can dances, Old West themed events, rodeos, you name it. And all of the money that they made from selling the tickets went into the rehabilitation of these buildings. They're the ones who put the roofs on. They're the ones who put all the boardwalks that we'll be walking on today. And by 1947, their efforts had attracted the attention of Hollywood once again. 32 movies later, the next player steps into the picture, and that's Mr. Bob Shelton that our museum here is named after. He was from Kansas, and in 1959 he was looking to invest. It dawned on him that at that time, 7 out of 10 of the most popular television and movies were Westerns. And so to quote the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. He's the one who decided to turn this into a Western-themed park as well as a movie studio. Now he had some help from a rather well-known silent partner. He was sort of silent. He made his presence known here on occasion, and he left a lasting impression on this property. He was a gentleman by the name of Marion Morrison. Anybody ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely a movie fan. That's John Wayne's actual name, Marion Michael Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So with the help of John Wayne, we really got off to a really big start. They were hoping that by the end of the 3-day weekend that marked the opening of Old Tucson as it exists today, that if they could get 5,000 people through here on those 3 days, it would be a good start for them. Well, imagine Mr. Shelton's surprise when he walks out there for the opening day ceremonies and there are 30,000 people that have come out to visit Old Tucson for opening day. 30,000. The next day, 15,000 people came through. The day after that, 12,000 people came through. So we were definitely off to a good start. At one point in time, for just shy of 20 years, we were the second most visited property in the state, second only to the Grand Canyon out in Williams. After Mr. Shelton leaves and Diamond Industries come in, they run the park and the studio until 2020 when everyone's favorite little bug shows up. And at that point, that was sort of bad news for us. The entire studio, the park, everything was shut down for almost 2 years. And in that time, Diamond Industries decided that they just couldn't do it anymore. They backed out of the operating contract. Now there for a little while, it was sort of up in the air as to whether Old Tucson would continue. That's when American Heritage Railways rides in like the cavalry in a Western movie. They are big on this property. They have invested a lot into stabilizing it and replacing a lot of the things that were lost over the years. And as a result, we are now back in the movie business. I've got 5 films lined up. 2 have been completed. The last one, the most recent, wrapped in June of last year, starring Tom Berenger. And there are 3 more that are slated for production. They had to be put on pause because of the writer's strike. And now that they're back up and running, we're going to start doing a little bit more of those projects later this summer. We've also shot television commercials. Television specials have been shot here. One of my favorite was actually done by John Wayne, and he was just doing one on the history of Hollywood Westerns and so forth. But he had to leave during the shooting to go back to for the Oscars because he'd been nominated for True Grit. But when he won for True Grit, what he didn't know is out here in Tucson, everyone on the crew was watching that night. Somebody went into town and bought every eye patch they could find.
That's awesome.
And when he came back onto the set to pick up shooting again, everyone turned around and went, "Congratulations, they all have Rooster Cogburn eye patches on." And he got a big kick out of it. So yes, we are very much a going concern at this point once again, and very happy to have all of you here today. So as far as the buildings around you, right across the street, Phoebe's candy shop here. This is one of the surviving structures from the movie Arizona. To give you an idea what they look like. It's completely made out of adobe, and it's named in honor of the female lead character in that movie. Now Phoebe, in the movie, she ran a pie shop in town. We don't have a pie shop here, so we named our candy store after her. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Young Guns 2 with Emilio Estevez, you'll see Phoebe's candy shop in one scene. We'll just step across the street here. There's a photograph I want to show you that shows the scene where you clearly see Phoebe. So here's the scene that was shot right where you folks are standing right now. Now this is supposed to, in the movie, be New Mexico in the 1880s. And Billy the Kid is bringing his herd of cattle through town, and the plan is to take them over here to the corral and put them in. Now this is where Hollywood, it means well, but sometimes when you're dealing with the way things actually worked in the Old West, it's a little off. First of all, no one told them that cattle don't follow. That's why they call it a cattle drive. You have to have what they would have either referred to. See, the word cowboy is a 20th century invention. Back in this day, the people who would have been riding along and making sure these cows are going where you want them are either going to be called vaquero or they're going to be called drovers. Well, they're going to be in the back, they'll be on the side, and the cows have nowhere to go except where you want them to. So it's like herding cats with horns, basically. So for the rest of this scene, you'll actually see the cows kind of wandering aimlessly over here in the corner because they have no idea what's going on. Now, the set dressers did a really good job of making it look like a Western town from that time period, but they missed one little teeny weeny detail. Now, when this film was made, we'd been a theme park for a little over 25 years. And while they took everything out, the one thing they missed was the Dolby speaker right here.
Whoops.
Yeah, that's the speaker that would have been broadcasting the "Howdy, folks! Welcome to Old Tucson" announcements. So yeah, that's what we like to refer to as an "oops" in movie making lingo. A little house on the prairie. We are used as the town of Mankato, Minnesota, because Mankato has mesquite trees and saguaro cactus and great big mountains in the background, right? No, not even close.
Nope.
But Michael Landon had filmed a few scenes for Bonanza here a couple years earlier, and that's how he became familiar with the property. So when they needed a town to stand in for Mankato, he said, well, look, there's a perfectly good town set right outside of Tucson. It's easy to bring in stuff from Los Angeles, and we'll shoot it here. So to hide all of the stuff they don't want you to see, what they do today is they just put up green screens and digitally remove anything they don't want you to see in the shot. This is 1973. Things are a little different back then. Computers are about the size of Phoebe's here, and it takes them 3 minutes to do 2 + 2. So you're definitely not doing a lot of computer-generated imagery back then. So their solution was to just bring in planter boxes on wheels with trees and shrubs and bushes, and they're moving them around to hide anything they don't want the camera to see with these trees. And they're taking advantage of the fact that television only really shows you from here to here, and a lot of the stuff is a close-up. So when you see Michael Landon talk in Mankato, talking to whoever the guest star is that week, if you see a tree or a shrub behind him, kind of very obvious, it's to hide the cactus that's probably behind him, or the mountain they don't want you to see, because it shouldn't be in Minnesota. Now, one of the things they went through a lot of trouble to hide is actually one of our biggest landmarks, and that's Golden Gate Peak right over here. This mountain right here is something to look for if you want to know if a movie was shot here. It shows up in just about everything. A lot of the times they'll do an establishing shot on it and start to pan all the way across the ridge line here, because they want the audience to understand that you are in the geographical center of nowhere. You are actually barely 12 miles from a major population center just on the other side of the mountains. Those mountains right there shield the camera from the fact that Tucson's just right over here. And that's why Hollywood loves this place. All of our utilities are buried. You have the mountains shielding it. If you look out this way, it's just open desert. So we can easily pass for 19th century Western America. We're going to head a little bit farther into town, but as we do so, take a look at the street here. You notice how it gets very narrow as it heads towards the tracks, and the buildings are all sort of angled inwards. This is a trick called forced perspective. This is how Hollywood fools the viewer into thinking something is much bigger than it really is. When we get a little bit farther down, take a look back down the street. The street will look much longer than the distance you've actually walked. Now, this structure right here is also from 1939. And when they shot the movie Arizona here, this was the changing room and restrooms for the gentlemen, and the ladies' changing room and restrooms was our schoolhouse over here. Remember those almost 60,000 guests that came through here on opening weekend? That was their only bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't want to hear Disneyland lament about how when they opened the park in 1955 and only half their bathrooms were working because of a plumber's strike. They had more than one. Our schoolhouse set here is set up as a schoolhouse right now because it's paying tribute to the first permanent school building built in the state in 1868. But it does show up in the movie Young Guns too. Now, since we have a small group today, we're going to step on inside here.
Oh, wow.
Now, as set up, what you're seeing here is what would have been referred to back in the 1860s as a rote school. And what that means is the teacher would stand up in front of her students and recite the lesson over and over and over again. The students would repeat it back to them. Once they were satisfied that this lesson had been learned, they would move on to the next one and the next one. And when you completed the catalog of everything that they thought you needed to know, you graduated. That was all the education that they had. It's never been actually used as a school in any movie. This building has been used in several pictures. It's shown up as a cantina, as a military barracks, and as a homestead. Now in Young Guns 2, this is a cantina in that movie. Billy the Kid is flirting with one of the bar ladies, and the army comes in through these doors here looking for him. He can't figure out how to get out of here because apparently he doesn't see the great big exit door right there behind him. And so he dives into a barrel in the corner here and hides out. Well, to distract the soldiers, you know, she basically distracts the soldiers, right? with the line, "What, you don't like the women?" And eventually the soldiers tire of the search, they leave. He comes out of the barrel, goes on his merry little way, and then he turns himself in a few scenes later, which was historically correct. That's actually what he did, and that was part of his long-term plan. It was the initials of the owner.
Oh, just like a tombstone. OK Corral.
Yeah, it was the initials.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Boy, it's really faded.
is our blacksmith shop right across the street here. It was built in 1939 for the movie Arizona, and it has always been just a blacksmith shop. Where we're standing right now, this centerpiece right here, was from the 1957 movie Gunfight at the OK Corral with Burt Lancaster. It is one of the many retellings of that really famous gunfight that Hollywood has done over the years. And there's a whole bunch of Hollywoodisms that show up in that when you start listing them off as a historian, it's really rather entertaining. It's also a good example of what we like to call movie magic. Now, in 1966, a fellow by the name of Gene Roddenberry comes up with a television show called Star Trek. Right? And one of the gizmos in that TV series is the transporter, and it allows you to send anyone or anything from one place to another like that. To which we at a movie studio go, big deal, we've been doing that for years, it's called editing. Here's a good example, gunfight at the OK Corral, when Wyatt, Morgan, and Virgil and Doc Holliday are walking to the gunfight. Right? They're walking down a back lot at Paramount Studios in California. And they're walking through a town that was far fancier than anything you were going to see in Tombstone, Arizona at that time. When the actual gunfight takes place, the city of Tombstone is barely 3 years old. It has just managed to evolve beyond a bunch of tents. They're just starting to build things out there. But in that movie, you see structures, on the size of our courthouse building or the hotel and saloon down here at the end of the street. But when they get to the end of the street and they all turn right, suddenly they're here in Arizona. And they come out behind the barn there, and that's where the gunfight begins. Now, the whole gunfight sequence starts just over there by stage 2, and it runs all the way over here to our little white band show. It has a ridiculous number of Cochise County cowboys taking on the Earps. Everybody has a shotgun. Half the town is getting involved in this fight. At one point, things are bursting into flames, and everyone's running around and the lead's flying. And it also shows off one of my favorites that Hollywood is notorious for, and that is the bottomless 6-shooter. Okay, Doc Holliday fires his revolver over 44 times. Never stops to reload it once. And at that point, historians and reenactors like myself, we like to go, well, okay, Hollywood, if this thing goes bang 6 times and you try to shoot it again, what you should hear is, that's it. Nothing should happen. Just a little click and an oops expression on your face. Now I can understand why they do that, because this model of revolver it takes a long time to reload this thing. Now in modern movies, of course, they just put it right in with the drama. Drop the clip, put the new clip in, cock it, and off you go. This is what that would look. Okay, can you imagine how long that gunfight would be if it's a 9.5 minute sequence and you're having to reload this thing on camera? It's like, all right, half cock it, open up the gate, dump out the shell, turn it, dump out the next one, and dump out the next one. Be right with you. Dump out the, and then you got to, sit there, find 6 bullets, put it in. How many more of them are there? Okay, 2, 4, 5. Okay, and where'd they go? So yeah, that's why you just see them shooting until there's nothing left to shoot, because it would just take way too long to show them doing it. But in the case of Doc Holliday, after firing his revolver all those times, he still has 4 bullets left before he gets to click. And he uses those 4 bullets to take out his dreaded enemy, Johnny Ringo. Now in that scene, Johnny Ringo's right out here in the street. Doc Holliday comes around behind the blacksmith shop, looks through that little window on the back wall, sees Johnny Ringo, comes around the corner and boom, 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 boom. Johnny Ringo is no more. And at that point, all the historians put our hands up and go, Johnny Ringo wasn't in Tombstone the day of the fight. Yep. In fact, he didn't die for about another 9 months of very mysterious circumstances. He was found with a bullet hole in his forehead, his boots are missing, and he's sitting propped up in the middle of nowhere on a tree trunk. But this is Hollywood that we're talking about. Right? You don't go to a movie for a history lesson. You go to be entertained. You go for excitement. And so that's why they took a 27 to 30 second long gunfight. That's how long it actually took, 27 to 30 seconds. And spread it out over 9.5 minutes as the climax of the movie. It didn't take place all over town. The actual gunfight takes place in an area not much bigger than the freight shed here. They are practically on top of each other. There are only 9 people involved. Okay, on the side of the lawmen, you've got Virgil, Morgan, and Wyatt Earp, and newly deputized, a friend of theirs, Dr. John Henry Holliday. On the other side, the Cochise County Cowboys, you've got Ike and Billy Clanton, Tom and Frank McClowery, and Billy Claiborne. when the first shot gets fired, two of the cowboys take off. Okay, Ike Clanton goes running one way, Billy Claiborne runs out the back. That leaves just the McLaury brothers and the other Clanton to take on the other four. So it's over in about 27, 30 seconds. Show you how close they were to each other. If this post is Billy Clanton, when Virgil kills him, he's about that far away from him.
Wow.
That's how close up they were. Wyatt comes out without a scratch because he has a little bit of experience. When the lead starts flying, he turns to the side. He's presenting a very small target. But apparently, according to him and several others, there were a lot of holes in the skirt of his frock coat from the bullets that were flying past him. Morgan, Virgil, and Doc, they aren't so lucky. Doc gets hit in the hip. He's sort of grazed, and the others one gets hit in the foot, one gets hit in the shoulder. But as I like to put it, it's 27 seconds. It puts us on the map. If you ask anybody to name an Old West gunfight, chances are they're going to talk about this one right here. Now, for you John Wayne fans, we're going to step across the street here to the John Wayne barn, or as we like to call it, look familiar?
Hallowed ground.
This is one of the 27 structures that John Wayne built for the 4 movies that he shot here, those 4 films being Rio Bravo, Rio Lobo, El Dorado, and McClintock. This barn shows up in all 4 of them. Of all the buildings he put up, we suspect that he had a soft spot for this one because it's always there. Its big screen time comes in Rio Bravo, the big prisoner exchange scene. Now, when you see that happen in a movie, how often does a prisoner exchange go off without any problems? Hardly ever. And that's the case in this movie. So John Wayne would have been standing, you see the picture right there, he would have been standing right here. The guy they're exchanging is standing right here. The warehouse would have been just past where our theater building is. And these ruins right over here, that's where Dean Martin will dive in to the side there when he tackles him. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the movie, here's a little rundown of how that scene goes. And again, it's a whole bunch of Hollywood tropes, one right after the other. So right here in the doorway, John Wayne sends the bad guy out. Dean Martin starts walking this way, and instead of passing each other, when he comes right up alongside of the bad guy, Dean Martin's character, appropriately named Dude, decides to go into super deputy mode. Okay, he tackles the bad guy, takes him into the ruins right over here, and a gunfight breaks out. So John Wayne's hiding behind the door over here. Colorado has got the windows open here, and he's looking out with his Winchester, and he's returning fire. And then you see 2 guys come running out, and they go across this supposed river, creek, or what have you. And that's when Colorado points out, well, if they get around behind us, it's going to be bad news. Now at that point, you can just picture the screenwriter going, well, how do we get them out of this? There's like more bad guys and good guys are about to be flanked. They're doomed. Oh yeah, watch this. Tap, 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 tap. He starts to pull out a thing called Deus Ex Machina, which is a fancy way of saying a convenient plot point that exists for the sole purpose of solving an otherwise unsolvable problem in a very convenient amount of time. What is that solution? Well, you hear 2 gunshots go off from off screen, and the 2 bad guys who are trying to run around them drop dead on the bridge. Now, they don't tell you who it is right away, but they still let the audience know exactly who fired those shots, because from off screen you hear the most recognizable sidekick laugh in Hollywood. And that's Walter Brennan in the role of Stumpy. And Stumpy's right along, there would have been a wall right along here. He's right behind it, and then it cuts to him with a very satisfied grin on his face, and you see smoke rising from the 2 barrels of his shotgun. Now, right behind him is a wagon, and you see that wagon at the very beginning of the movie. And it's up here on Front Street when John Wayne's character tells the captain of that wagon train, well, that's too dangerous a cargo to have in the livery stable. You need to put it outside of town where it'll be safe. Well, outside of town is about 110 feet away from where that scene was shot. What's in that wagon? Dynamite. Several cases worth. And that's when Stumpy gets the idea. He grabs one of the cases of dynamite, brings it over to John Wayne. And at that point, you get one of the greatest old married couple conversations I have ever heard in a film. Where John Wayne basically goes, you think you can throw that? Just you watch. He picks up the dynamite, Stumpy throws it, John Wayne takes a shot, it falls short, blows up in the middle of the street. Well, can't you throw any better than that? Oh, ain't nothing good enough for you, is it? Why, what would you do without me? I'd probably do it myself. Well, you have a good point there. He takes another stick of dynamite, lobs the thing as far as he can. John Wayne takes his next shot. Boom, the front of the porch goes up. They get to the next one. You think you can throw a little farther? Oh, just you watch me. He grabs 3 sticks of dynamite this time, wraps them up in a bandana, and does a Hail Mary football pass. And that dynamite lands on the building. The Duke takes his shot. Boom! The whole front of the building goes up. And at that point, the bad guys don't want to be bad guys anymore. They all come out with their guns on the ground. We give up. We don't want to get blown up. You know, problem solved. That's how it goes down in the movie. Not how it went down the first time they shot it. Okay? Now, I've been on a couple movie sets in my time, and if you have any structures like the warehouse building or the barn or anything like that that are actual buildings, they're going to be used for storage. Well, that was the case with the warehouse here on the Rio Bravo set. So when the day came to blow up the building, they dutifully cleaned out everything from the warehouse on the first floor. No one thought to look upstairs. So, yeah, you see where this is going. Stumpy throws the dynamite, the Duke takes a shot, the pyrotechnic guy goes whoomp with the igniters, boom, the whole building goes up. And that's when they discovered that someone, for reasons known only to themselves, had stored several reams of colored paper in the upstairs of the warehouse. The explosion shredded all of that colored paper. Poof, up in the air it goes and comes raining down all over Old Tucson like a very colorful ticker tape parade. Took them a week to clean up all of that colored paper, and in that time they had to rebuild the set they only intended to blow up once. So what you see in the movie is take 2 on that scene when the warehouse actually blows up. In El Dorado, you get a cameo appearance of this barn. When John Wayne's character in that film rides out to meet the villain played by Ed Asner, he goes out to his ranch, which is several miles outside of town. Well, in this case, several miles is right down the road here and around the corner. You'll see him, that building was not yet there. So he comes up this road here, and you see where the wood fence ends, that pillar right there. Well, that's the entrance to the ranch. Those are the gates. He goes past those gates, turns to the right, continues down to where the ranch house set is, okay? Well, he doesn't trust Ed Asner or all the really nasty-looking gunslingers that he's hired, so he backs his horse up. When he does, he comes back through those gates, and you'll see the barn right there behind him in the background. The next time it gets any serious close-up time is the movie McClintock. During the big chase scene where Maureen O'Hara's character is running through town and the whole town is following them because their fights have become the stuff of legend, and everyone wants to see how this is going to end. Well, this is another example of moving someone from one piece of the property to the other like this. She's actually heading down Front Street away from the hotel. Now, a lot of the buildings down there have changed over the years, but we know which way she's running because the mountains never change. So she's heading in that direction. She goes around the corner and suddenly she's on this side of the lot. She comes down the road across a little footbridge that was here at the time, and she runs through the doors of the barn right here. When the door closes, it cuts to her coming out the barn. But that barn is a completely different structure on the opposite side of the property. And that's the one that closes on her dress. The dress comes off and she's running around in her bloomers for the rest of that chase scene. Now, since this one does get most of the screen time, the front half does get a little love too from the camera. So we're going to step around to the front for its last of the 4 appearances that it made. This is Swede Larsson's gun shop in the movie El Dorado. Okay? After very young James Caan in the role of Mississippi proves that he is an artist as a knife thrower. He can hit anyone or anything, just whips that knife out from behind him, throws it, takes him out. But he can't use a gun at all. He's nowhere near as proficient with it. And they know this because in one of the scenes prior to arriving at these doors, John Wayne's character in that film asks him, "Do you know how to shoot?" And he hands him the gun. Says, "Well, why don't you take a shot at that cactus over there?" Boom! He fires the shot, misses completely. Which is good, because if you shoot a saguaro cactus in this state, you can get some serious jail time for that. Yeah, so he says, "Well, when we get into the next town, we'll have to get you something a little more manageable." Well, this is the gun shop that they go to. Swede Larson, they go in these doors, they turn to the left, and this is where he sold that little tiny double-barrel shotgun that he carries with him the rest of the movie. That he ends up being pretty good with. Now, the next time you watch that movie, pay attention to the scene where he shoots that gun for the very first time. He takes him out and he goes, "All right, give it a try." Boom! He fires off and the cactus just vaporizes, essentially. But for whatever reason, they did not use a blank in that shotgun. Look very carefully at the muzzle flash. It's animated. Yeah, somebody sat down and drew the bang, drew the smoke, and it goes by like this, and you probably wouldn't have noticed it when the film first came out, because the films back then were nowhere near the resolution that they are today. When you watch it on a modern high-resolution monitor, you really see that hand-drawn boof that comes out of the shotgun. I mean, it looks kind of bad, actually. Yeah, they might as well have the little stick that comes out and have a bang flag drop down for all the believability that it has. Now, right here in the middle of the street, this bridge is another landmark to watch out for if you want to know if a film was shot here. It was built in 1939 for the movie Arizona, and it usually marks the entrance to town. You'll see it quite clearly in Rio Bravo. This is where the wagon train is stopped by Dean Martin. And Dean Martin would have been standing right about here, and he's telling them, "You can't bring your guns into town, guys. You're going to have to check your weapons." And at that point, the wagon train captain rides down to talk to John Wayne, and John Wayne's office would have been right at the end of the street here where that fence is running across. It also serves as the border between Mexico and Texas, and Buchanan rides alone. So where we're standing right now, this was Mexico. You cross the bridge and you're in Ayers, Texas in that film. And the strange thing about that title is that once Buchanan crosses the bridge and enters into Texas, he's never alone for the rest of that movie. Now we're going to step around into our town square here. We're going to head on over to the courthouse building. Now we're heading to the courthouse for two reasons. One, it gives you a very nice view of the town square here, and two, it has air conditioning.
Nice.
Right across the street, starting with the Hotel Del Toro, the next two buildings over, those were all built in 1939 for the movie Arizona. Now, Phoebe's Pie Shop would have been the middle building here where the apothecary sign is sitting. As built, the Hotel Del Toro was a single-story adobe structure for the first part of its life. The way you see it right now with the two porches and the upstairs, that was all added on to the structure in 1951 for a film called The Last Outpost. Now, The Last Outpost is most definitely a B-grade Western film, and it probably would have just ended up as a footnote in a film catalog somewhere if it weren't for the fact that the lead actor in that film would go on to be the president of the Screen Actors Guild, governor of California, and president of the United States. And that actor was Ronald Reagan. So he would have walked right through the front doors there of the Hotel Del Toro several times in the course of that film. In more recent times, it has shown up in Death Wish with Charles Bronson. You wouldn't think of Charles Bronson in this kind of environment. And most of that movie actually takes place back east in New Jersey. But in a certain sequence, he's actually out here doing some work in Arizona, and the person he's working for, they go into town. Well, this is town. And so you'll see them drive their station wagon across the bridge, and they pull up, and this whole part of the set is serving as an old westy kind of town, sort of tombstone-ish. And you see them putting on a gunfight show in town for the people who are visiting. The people you see in that scene are actually the stunt actors from Old Tucson. The people you see watching the show are guests just like you who happened to be in the park that day. They walked over and said, hey, who wants to be in a Charles Bronson movie? Okay, so they lined them up, they put on the show, they said just ignore the cameras and enjoy the show. So that's the only time you actually see an Old Tucson studio and Old Tucson doing what it does, being a movie set. So it's kind of like it's doing its own thing. Now, I can't really recommend the rest of that movie. It is incredibly violent, but if you just want to see that particular shot, just go on YouTube sometime and Google Charles Bronson Death Wish Old Tucson scene, and it'll just show you that sequence that was shot here for the film. It is also very recognizable as the hotel that you see in the movie The Three Amigos.
Yes.
Now, when the Three Amigos arrive in town, they come riding around the corner here on their one horse, or three guys, and they come out, they come around the corner here, and at that time, there was another set of buildings that ran right down the middle. So Front Street, when you cross the bridge, it actually split in two, and you had the hotel on one side, the cantina set in the middle, and then more buildings over on this side. Unfortunately, in 1995, we had a fire come through start here in April of that year, and it destroyed about 40% of the structures here, including the cantina, a lot of the sets over here, and most of our backlot area was all destroyed, sad to say. That was kind of a tragic moment in its own right, but the true tragedy is that we lost a lot of film memorabilia that had been stored in one of those buildings along Mankato Street, and a lot of that stuff was donated by John Wayne. We couldn't get it out fast enough, and it went up with the buildings.
Was the fire caused by an arson?
It was an arson fire. Yep.
Okay. And did they catch the...
Not yet, but because of the amount, the financial amount of the damage, it's still an ongoing investigation. Last I heard, they think they know who may have done it, but they're still trying to get enough information together to issue a warrant for them. So right here in the middle, that would have been the cantina set for Three Amigos, where the Three Amigos do that very memorable "My Little Buttercup" song and dance routine. That would have been right here. Then when they step outside, you see the airplane fly right over the top of the hotel. In Winchester 73, welcome to Tascosa, Texas. This is where Jimmy Stewart's character rides into town. He rides into Texas, comes around the corner, ties his horse up right about where that tree is, and he walks into the Hotel Del Toro as well. For you McClintock fans, the hotel that where she falls out off the balcony and into the hay wagon was right over here, where Big Jake's restaurant is. That's why it's nicknamed Big Jake's Restaurant. The wagon would have been right about where that barrel is, and we know that that's the side of the building they were shooting on, because when you watch Maureen O'Hara, she starts to back up. Before she falls off the balcony, you'll see Golden Gate Peak framed in the doorway behind her, so that's how we know which way they were pointing. Now, a funny thing about that scene is John Wayne was not supposed to make that jump. That was supposed to have been done by his stuntman. But his stuntman, as the story goes, had gone into Mexico the night before with a couple of his buddies and came back with tummy trouble. So he couldn't show up to work that day. So the director asked John Wayne if he would be willing to make the jump. So it was all about 10 feet. He'd made jumps like that before, so he knew what to do. So when it came time, she falls off the balcony. He walks up, and if you watch, he does it correctly. He comes up to the edge. He kicks his foot out. That gets his momentum moving forward. His left foot joins it, and then he puts his hands straight up, and down he goes. But he was so focused on doing that shot. Watch his left wrist the next time you watch the movie McClintock. When his hands go up, he forgot to take off his Rolex. Okay, right here on his left wrist is his very authentic 1880s gold Rolex wristwatch for all the world to see.
It was before time.
Yeah, there you go. So proof of time travel. Yeah. So when he lands next to Maureen O'Hara, that's a completely different shot. He's just jumping in from off camera, but he still has his hands up to keep continuity in the shot, but the wristwatch isn't there anymore. So again, oops. Now, if you've ever wondered what a soundstage looks like, you picked a good day to visit us because our soundstage is open today. Oh, yesterday was, much warmer. Well, we have a slight bit of cloud cover, and that really helps. Won't be anything else. outside. This looks like a 3-story building, doesn't it? Look up. We're only 1 story. This is called a false front. So from the outside, we have 2 stories and a belfry or whatever you need to be up top. The reason that it doesn't have anything above you is that that's where all the lights are going to be, all the scaffolding for the cameras, the microphones, anything you don't want the camera to see, it's going to be up here above you. Now, if you have to have a roof in here, no problem. You can just put in a false roof. It'll be suspended right across the top here. The other way to do it, and this is another trick that's been used to great effect, you just take the chandeliers and you lower them down a little bit so the camera can see them. And the viewer will go, oh, okay, there's some chandeliers. There's the ceiling right there, even though there's nothing really above them. If you have a scene where, like say, this is the county seat, the mayor is going to go out and address people outside the building. Well, his office is on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is either in a satellite wing of the ground floor, or it's in a completely different studio somewhere else. And they'll film him walking up to the doors there, and you'll have basically a painting on the other side of the doors. That when you look through the curtains, you'll see the roofs of the buildings, you'll see the mountains outside, what have you. And then he opens up the door and he walks through. Then he'll be here on this stage, having climbed up out of the ladder there, and then he walks out those doors. They're shooting from the outside, and it looks like when you edit everything together, he walks up to the door, opens it up, walks outside, and now he's talking to people, and he's in 2 completely different locations to do that whole thing. And that's the same thing what we have here. You have your main set right here. You have 2 satellite stages. This one is currently set up as a general store. This one is currently set up as a bank. Now back here we have, it's set up as a courtroom right now. And it'll give you an idea of what a soundstage actually looks like when they're not doing any shooting in it. Okay, that's where all your lights are going to be. This is where all your electrical wiring and all of that's going to be. You also have the air conditioning units in here because a lot of this stuff throws off a lot of heat. So you have to maintain a specific temperature in here to keep all the electronics in modern day film and television happy. Now there's one small problem. That stuff is really, really loud. So when you go to shoot the scene, you have to turn everything off. That doesn't change the fact that you're in southern Arizona in the summertime when it's going to start to get really warm really, really fast. So after a while, it does get a little uncomfortable in here in between shots. They'll kick the AC back on, drop the temperature down, turn it off, and shoot the scene again. And this is another one of those set pieces that can be pretty much anything you want. It's set up as a courtroom right now. It can be a church. It can be a parlor in a really swanky mansion. It can be an office. And all you have to do is move some of your things around, and it's done. Now, one question we get asked from time to time is, how do they hide the exit doors? You either don't show them, you shoot it in such a way that you're not looking directly at them, or you just cover them up. You can put furniture in front of it. There's a slight indentation around there. You could, if this is a house, for example, you just put pocket doors on that thing. It'll just say, oh, well, that goes into the next room. Not really. It's just hiding the exit door and a big red exit sign right there. The other trick that Hollywood uses is that for as amazing and wondrous as the brain is, it is also the dumbest organ in the human body, and it only knows what the senses tell it, including the eyes. It runs off pattern recognition. That's how it streamlines its job. When it's looking around, okay, it's counting things, it's putting things into little groups. Well, if you do a shot, an establishing shot, the brain is going to go, okay, curtains, window with curtains, window with curtains. If you put curtains on that thing, it's going to go, it's a window, and it'll completely ignore it as anything but another window. So that's one of the many ways that Hollywood kind of uses your brain to make their job easier and to fool you into seeing exactly what it is that they want you to see. Now, before we head back outside, I have one of my favorite bloopers is right here in this building, and it didn't even appear in the movie. It only appeared in the movie poster. So this is the one of the movie posters for Tombstone from 1993. Are you familiar with the movie?
Favorite movie.
Okay. Who's carrying the shotgun as they're walking down to the OK Corral. Doc Holliday has a shotgun right here. Well, who hands him the shotgun? Virgil hands it to him.
Yeah.
This is the same shotgun.
That's funny.
Okay, this is before Virgil hands him the shotgun. This is after Virgil hands him the shotgun, because this is not a clip from the movie. These are individual pictures of the actors that they put together. Yeah, watch the famous scene where they're walking down. Doc is actually on this side of Virgil. Okay, he's on the outside. So they just put them all together. And they did a little Photoshop. But somebody really needs to learn how to use the airbrush tool a little bit. Because if you look, there is no gun actually in his hand. His hand is just right there. His thumb is not gripping it. His fingers go into the actual weapon. And if you copy paste it, which looks like they did, you move it over here. Look, it's the exact same. The shadows are exactly the same. Everything's the same. And this hand is also airbrushed, as well as this one, because there's probably something there that they don't want you to see, and they're just trying to make it look as close as they can to the scene. But I love the fact that it's the same shotgun in two different people's hands. Now, before we head on out, right over here, these are the lobby cards for the movie Arizona. And you'll notice that they're colorized. The movie was originally intended to be in color because Gone with the Wind was in color, Wizard of Oz was in color. Color was a big deal. And so part of that $2.3 million was intended for color photography. They lost that $500,000 for the color photography because they weren't sure how successful this movie was going to be. So they kind of backed off a little bit, produced it as a black and white movie. But they went through and they colorized these things to get your attention. So before there were movie posters, there were lobby cards like this one in movie theaters. So you see these guys are very brightly colored, everything's brightly colored, but not everything was colored. If you look, it's a black and white, you definitely see it's a black and white picture because the wagon hasn't been colored at all. It's still black and white. The horses here are still in black and white. Just the cowboys and the cactus behind them are in color. These are the two main characters for it. This is Jean Arthur. She was the big draw in that film. She was a well-known screen actress in 1939. And this gentleman right over here is a very, very young William Holden. He was only 22 years old when he made this movie. This was only his second film. And one of the jokes that is popular among the historians is, now these are the two love interests in the movie, but in real life, he's 22, she's 39. So it's the first confirmed cougar sighting here on the property. Okay, no more on that one. Now at this point, we're going to step outside and head around the corner to the last set piece. One of my little sidekicks.
What does this sign mean? It's a good day at Old Tucson.
Killer is a slang expression for exceptionally good.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Wunderbar.
Wunderbar, okay, yeah.
Casket, not a casket.
Casket,
Yes,
yeah.
a casket.
Too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've often wondered why our bank set has a coffin and a jail cell attached to it. And then we finally kind of figured it all out. This is what banks mean when they say substantial penalties for early withdrawal.
Yeah, definitely.
Right around the corner here is one of those set pieces that gets a lot of recognition when people see it. And every time they ask you, hey, is this the building from? All you have to do is say yes. It answers every question.
Yep.
Was this used in? Yes. What about yes? Is it also in? Yes. So, this is the Mission Santa Maria. It was built, the original mission set was built in 1939 in Arizona. At that time, it actually had a chapel. It was about the same size as the door frame that went back off to the front of the building here. If they were filming here on a Sunday, they would actually hold church. The original structure, unfortunately, was severely damaged in 1995 when you drop several tons of water from the air as an aerial fire tank. It generally doesn't end well for adobe structures, so this was the replacement for it. But it's seen in a whole bunch of things that were shot here. The opening scene of Tombstone with Kurt Russell is shot right here at the mission set. This is where Curly Bill Brocious and his band come out of the desert. They ambush the wedding party out here. We hear you've been killing cowboys, and boom, boom, they shoot everybody down. It also is the scene that introduces Johnny Ringo in that film. Now, none of that actually happened, historically speaking. This is Hollywood just letting the audience know that anybody with a red sash on is bad news in that movie. They also want you to understand that Johnny Ringo is a psychopath. All right, he has no problem speaking Latin, quoting from the Bible, translating Spanish, killing the person that he just talked to, and then sitting down and having a nice meal like it's another Tuesday at the office. A few years before that, this was seen in Joe Kidd with Clint Eastwood. This is where the big climactic gunfight scene starts. It starts here at the mission set. They run around behind this building here. That's where he goes over to and gets the steam locomotive and drives it right through the back of the saloon, appropriately named the Railroad Saloon. You see it again in John Wayne's El Dorado. The wagons that they're hiding behind would have been right about here. And they're being fired on by the bandits who are up there in the left bell tower. They actually added another bell tower for that scene. And right about here is where the character named Bull, and this is really kind of cool. Look at the weapon he's holding. That is a Colt revolving rifle. You rarely ever see those in Westerns, but they were all over the place back then. He takes and gets a lucky shot and it hits the bell. Bang! Okay, and that gives John Wayne an idea. Well, why don't we make a little music? And they all start shooting the bells up there so that the bandits can't hear themselves think. And that gives them enough time to run across through those doors and continue the fight inside the chapel. Anybody seen the television show, The High Chaparral? All right, so in that show, they went everywhere. They were in California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Old Mexico, and every town they went to, that building went with them. Every town they visit has a church that looks just like this one behind me. All they did was shoot it from slightly different angles, redress the set outside, and hope nobody noticed. It's the same church from last week, and the week before, and the week before that. Now, I am happy to report that the Homestead set from High Chaparral did survive the fire in 1995. It sits just behind the mission set here. Unfortunately, we're doing a lot of work back there right now, so we can't go beyond the mission set here. But the homestead, the barn, the ranch hands, all that, it's all still there. We do go back there during the Western experience. If you take the, you can see the way the road's worn down here. If you take the stagecoach, they'll go right past it. The railroad goes past it, the stagecoach right goes past it. That's January through May. Yeah. And yeah, they'll go right, yeah, the stagecoach route goes right past it. Yeah, you go under the gate, this is the High Chaparral, you go right underneath it on the stagecoach, the house will be off to the right side. From here, we've got a lot going on over there right now, so. And we also have a lot of what we call our desert visitors out around the High Chaparral. And yeah, they don't take kindly to people walking around there. Those are the ones that kind of go every now and again. Yeah. We just call them that because if you call them what they really are, it tends to freak people out. So we just refer to them as the desert visitors, which is a little strange since they live here and we're actually the visitors. But at this point, we're going to turn the group around, just head right across. We're going to head back towards the gift shop at this point. We're going to make a quick stop over here at the brewery building.
The one's picking up. Somebody left out their underwear. Big water tower. They're getting ready for their Halloween stuff. So that's all blocked off right now.
Shipments of anything coming from the East Coast. So a lot of towns, a lot of hotels and whatnot had their own breweries, just like this one right here. If you could ferment it, they would. And so they're making drinks out of all kinds of things. Gin was usually the easiest one. If you had access to certain things, you could make something relatively close to whiskey if you knew how to brew. Those homemade concoctions had a number of nicknames in the Old West, including but not limited to Pop Skull, Knock Me, How Come You So. My personal favorite, the Oil of Gladness. And in the case of a mixture that was popular with the mining crowd, it was a 50-50 mixture of molasses and gin. And the gin could be made out of just about anything. They used to refer to that one by the incredibly unflattering nickname, Yuck.
Yuck.
So from here, we're going to head straight back down the main street here, all the way back to the last outlet. They do eventually come to an end, such is the case with our walking tour this morning. On behalf of the entire staff and crew of Old Tucson, I'd like to thank you for braving the elements and coming out and spending some time here with us with our little bits of Hollywood history. Thank you all very much for coming out today, and in the words of many a director that's worked on roughly 700 projects on this property, that's a wrap, folks. Right this way.
But I wanted to show you, it's still pretty remote. This is the parking lot here, but it's crazy that Tucson is literally on the other side of those mountains there. You have to go through Gates Pass or Kidney Road to get here. Gates Pass is a little adventurous of a little drive, but man, so beautiful. So many saguaro cactuses as you come through. So, all right, that'll do it. Lots of love. Peace. So well themed, so well preserved. Man, here in Tucson, we were devastated from the fire of 1995. This place has tons of history. Alrighty. That'll do it from Old Tucson Studios. Unfortunately, we couldn't get all of the studio because they're getting ready for their Halloween stuff. Yeah, it's May. Getting ready for their Halloween haunt, Nightfall, which has been a long tradition here. And they're getting ready to film 2 films, so there's certain areas were closed off. But man, I haven't been here, I think, since '94. I'm pretty old.